Hello everyone, and welcome back to our Middle East adventure. And today we're going to take you to one of the most amazing, stupendous, spectacular, whatever adjective you want to use, world wonders. And it's a place that you need to visit as soon as possible. Petra. We're going to give you all our best hints, tips, and tricks to plan your adventure here and why you need to put this at the top of your bucket list and get here as soon as you possibly can.
Welcome to Living Phase 2.
Hi, I'm Mike.
And I'm Nancy, and we're empty nesters striving to live life to the fullest.
And we are living that full life, traveling across the Middle East to see all the amazing sights it has to offer.
We are, and friends, today we're on our way to Petra, but our first stop is going to be in the little town of Nebu. Here we're going to visit St. George's Orthodox Church that was built back in the Byzantine times. Now, the reason this church is so special is it has the oldest map of the Holy Lands, the oldest. And it happens to be that it's a mosaic tile in the floor of this church. Some of it you can see here has been destroyed by earthquakes, but there's an amazing amount that's here and that's visible, and it's like, this is just the coolest thing ever.
Yeah, it really is. This mosaic was only from a couple hundred years after the time of Christ, so it really established what the early Christians were doing, where they found their holy sites, and it really puts some historical perspective on these sites to validate that their current locations are the same ones that the early Christians believed were holy back in that time. So it was really, yeah, it was beautiful. Now the church itself was under restoration, a significant restoration. So you can see all the construction and everything. But we then, got to go in and actually see the mosaic that's still on the floor. We saw the Greek Orthodox altar off to the side, still had the candles burning, but they had moved it over. So, but it's going to be here. If you're coming in probably a year or so, this is going to be a spectacular church and certainly a don't miss here.
Well, from there, our driver took us to Mount Nebu. Now, Mount Nebu is a holy site. This is where Moses overlooked the promised land, but was not allowed to enter. This area is very just spiritual filling. Now, it's maintained by the Franciscans, and as soon as we got out of the car, it's so clean and just fresh. But one of the first things you see is this incredible statue of the profile of Moses. And then as you get closer, though, the profile, you can see all of these things built into the profile. For instance, you see the face of Jesus, and you see the books of the Pentateuch, the first 5 books of the Bible are there. So it is just a really cool statue as you're walking up to the church.
Yeah, it is with olive trees, and it just feels like a holy place.
It does.
Yeah. Well, you walk on up and you go around, and the first thing that you see as you approach the front of the church, because the front of the church is facing over the mountain where Moses would have viewed the promised land, you see this massive crucifix, and it is a combination of the serpent, which then became Moses' staff, and it's also a crucifix of Jesus. All 3 images blended into one, and it really is quite a spectacular, and it's right there at the spot where it is purported that Moses would have stood. And you go to that spot, you look out, and it's a little hazy today, so that was a little unfortunate, but if you look through the haze, you can actually see Jerusalem. You can see the current city of Jerusalem. You can see Israel right across the valley here, and that's why they say this is where Moses would have viewed the promised land. Well, we went on inside the church, and much like a lot of this area, once again, it's fully covered with mosaics. The people here in this area, that's what they're famous for, is mosaics. They still to this day produce mosaics, do beautiful work. In fact, we're going to show you some here in a few minutes, but the entire church in here was covered in mosaics. So they're keeping it now and trying to make sure they maintain it and preserve it. And the Franciscans, which, they actually manage a lot of the holy sites in the Holy Land, are taking care of that. So you can see all the different beautiful mosaics of animals, of people, of scenes from the Bible, of, and you can walk through all that. And then there is a small chapel right at the asp at the back of the church. And in fact, when we were there was a pilgrim group that was having Mass. So that was really nice to see. They were from Nebraska, yeah. We don't see a lot of people here, but we did bump into a group from Nebraska. As we left the church then, we looked out over that view Moses would have had, and we did see an olive tree that was planted by Pope, now it's Saint Pope John Paul II, and it's flourishing. It's funny, you see a picture of it when he planted it and where it is now, and it's growing into a big, beautiful olive tree, and he planted that with a prayer that the Middle East would have peace. So, we all pray for that someday.
Well, from there, we were taken to a Mosaic workshop. Now, this was pretty interesting because as we went inside, there were workers there that were making these beautiful mosaics. And so one was cutting the mosaics, and 3 of them were gluing the mosaics onto the canvas, and they showed us how the canvas, it was drawn on, and they have to draw in reverse image, and they actually glue the little mosaic tiles on with a simple glue of just flour and water. So that was pretty cool. But then they take you into a shop to sell you things. I did get a Christmas ornament here of the Tree of Life. Mm-hmm. But there's really beautiful mosaics. They would ship things back to the United States or wherever you're from of tables or big pictures. And one of the things that was interesting is they had micro mosaics that were made into like little pendants or earrings, and they were upwards of 600 Jordanian dollars. That would have been 900 mm-hmm. US dollars. So, but they were beautiful to see.
Yeah, I got a patch there. We, we're not big shoppers. For those of you following our channel, we're not we don't do a lot of souvenir shopping, things like that. We'd rather spend our money traveling than shopping. But a lot of people are, and that's what they enjoy. So, you need to let your guide. So, a little pro tip here: you need to let your guide and your tour company know. Do you like to shop or not like to shop? So in advance, we let them know very clearly, listen, we don't want to stop at a lot of shops. And so, this one was interesting in the fact that you're in an area that is absolutely famous for mosaics. This is what they've done this for 1,000 years. And so because they're so famous for that, and these people, that's what they do, it was interesting to see. And you of course you end up with the sales pitch at the end to buy it, but we didn't mind that too much. So in this case, it was okay. But yeah, always let your guide know, do you like to shop or not shop? And just make your wishes known, and they'll accommodate you as you like then.
Well, now it's lunchtime, and so we were taken to a restaurant that was a caravanserai. So that meant where the travelers on camels would stop and rest their camels, and they would eat and rest. And here it's now this big restaurant and gift shop area. But I had
the Jordanian version of a truck stop.
Yes, I had the buffet. You had the mansef,
yes,
which is lamb and yogurt
mm-hmm.
and rice.
Right. And
that's the national dish of Jordan.
Very famous, and it was really good. I'm not a huge yogurt fan in general, but this was great. I mean, the yogurt's a sauce that you pour over the rice as you eat it with the lamb. I found it just absolutely excellent. Our guy did have to, he asked us early on in the day, did you want the mansef or the buffet? And of course I said, yeah, I want the mansef. I want to try the national dish of Jordan. And so it takes them a long time to cook it. I compared it to a Jordanian pot roast is what I thought, because the lamb was just tender and just falling apart like a real good pot roast would be. And it was really, really good. Your buffet looked good too.
My buffet was good. That actually, one of the things is we were the only people there. It was just us two, the driver of the car, and our guide. So 4 of us that were there in this restaurant, and the food was all fresh. It all looked really, really good.
Well, they knew we were coming, but yeah.
Yeah, but that's a lot of food to prepare when there's not many people.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, you're going to hear this theme throughout our whole visit here to the Middle East, and it's what we said up front. Why do you need to visit the Middle East now? Well, we're going to give you our first pitch right now. There is no one here. There is literally, I mean, with the problems that have been going on, between Israel and Gaza and that, a lot of people are just afraid to come. And we've had so many people ask us, well, do you think it's safe? Do you think it's safe? Jordan has been absolutely amazing. You saw from our previous video, and if you didn't see that, back up and see our tour of Amman. All the Jordanian people have been welcoming,
so welcoming.
All of them are welcome to Jordan, welcome, and it's just been incredible. I mean, this is not what people, they might hear of something bad like California. We've heard so many people say we pray for California and the fires and everything, and they go, "Are you okay?" And we're like, "Well, we live 2,000 miles from California," and it's the same here. The problems that are occurring in other areas are not here, and so right now, because a lot of people are worried about coming here, now is the time to come because nobody's here.
Well, now we're on our way to Little Petra. They also call this Baida in Arabic. And on our way here, we saw these Atlantica pistachio trees that are 2,000 years old. These were just incredible to see. They're not the pistachio trees that we would think of where we get the nuts, although they do produce some sort of fruit. But yeah, 2,000-year-old trees. Pretty
cool.
The
trunks are massive. They're like 10 feet across. They're pretty amazing. And these two trees have been around that whole time that the villagers, they go and they'll decorate them. And it's pretty amazing when you see those. But we continued on past those pistachio trees, and there's where we get our first glimpse of the rocks in the area, and our guide is just so good, Muhammad, our guide. We will link some information to him throughout these videos, so if you'd like to contact him or any of the tour companies that we utilized, we'll make sure to put links in there. And by the way, no, we're not sponsored by any of them. It's just they're doing a wonderful job for us. But he did a great job explaining the geology and why is Petra where it's at. And we're driving right along a line where one side is limestone and one side is sandstone. And you can really see the difference in the white, yellow, and the red sandstone, and that's what Petra's carved into, is this sandstone. And we drove down here, and Little Petra is kind of the back door of Petra. So it's a small little area, and it was a caravanserai. So you remember we just talked about the caravanserai we stopped at for lunch. Well, Petra was a caravanserai 2,000 years ago where people would come through on the trade routes throughout the Middle East, and they would stop there with their camels. They'd get refreshed, have water, eat, and it was basically the Motel 6 Holiday Inn truck stop for 2,000 years ago. And that's how the people of Petra made their fortune, and it was a fortune they made, was taking care of people going through this trade route. So we went, and in the front end, as many places here in the Middle East, there's kind of some shops and some people in there. But again, there was no one here.
There's one family.
One family,
a
local family. Yep. It's actually, the school's here on holiday, so most of the people you're going to see around us are actually Jordanian locals who are taking their children out, because they're out of school and they're going on family trips to see these historical sites. Well, you go through a very narrow canyon and you enter into Little Petra, and it makes you speechless. Yeah, I'm still speechless.
It does. Now our guide is always so good about talking about the different carvings and that the meanings these different carvings have, and the religious significance or the significance of the time of all the different things. So it's really fascinating to hear the stories of why different things are carved into the rock.
And how they're carved, yeah. Well, we saw much of what you've seen in Petra in the movies and all of that. Remember, most of those are tombs. Even though they may have names like the Treasury, the Monastery, things like this, most of them are tombs. And then some are, different areas of housing. Some are shops, things like that. So like one area we saw was carved out from the wall, and they joke that it's the McDonald's of caravanserais. So there's a large room, actually has a hole in one side, and it has a basin where water would flow. They could wash themselves, they could get drinks, their camels would stay right outside, and then through that hole on the other side was the kitchen, to where they would prepare the meals, hand them through, and then that would the benches and everything would be covered in cushions, and they could rest and sleep there. So yeah, it's really an efficient operation. You can see how they would have operated there.
Now, you had a really interesting stop here where you actually climbed a bunch of steps. I stayed down at the bottom and took pictures of Mike. But you got to see a very cool fresco here. It's the only fresco in Petra.
Yeah, it is.
That they've discovered.
Yeah, that they've discovered. They believe there's other ones that are still hidden, but this one, it's up in an upper room, which they're believing would have been maybe a residence or a shop up there. And it was actually a couple. Just by chance, they were visiting Petra, and their profession was they were fresco restorers. They were very knowledgeable about frescoes. They went into this room, they looked up on the ceiling, and they said, wait a minute, something looks odd here. And they kind of looked at it, they looked closer, and they said, we think there's a fresco under this, under the smoke and the soot from years and years of use. And so they applied for a permit to the Jordanian government, they got permission, and they came in, and they actually cleaned and restored this one fresco in this room. And it's beautiful. You can see the laurels and the different, cupids and the gods and everything that's up there. And yeah, I hope that someday they can maybe restore some more of them, but this is the only fresco that remains in all of Petra, not just Little Petra. So yeah, that was quite fascinating.
Well, from Little Petra, we went to the village of Wadi Musa. Now, Wadi Musa is really the town where you're going to stay. So when people say they're going to Petra, they're going to stay at a hotel in Wadi Musa. And we happen to have a hotel there at the Marriott, is where the travel agency had arranged things for us. And when we checked in, the receptionist said, "Would you like to see Petra by night?" And we thought, oh, that sounds very, very cool. So we quickly checked into our room, had a light dinner, and then the receptionist had arranged for us to have a taxi and then get the tickets to go see Petra by night, which, by the way, were only 17 Jordanian dollars.
Well, the hotel, as Nancy mentioned, arranged for a taxi, actually a round-trip taxi from the hotel down to the Petra site, and dropped us off. We had our tickets already, and we started the walk into Petra. Now, this is really a different experience. Now, remember, we haven't actually seen the main site of Petra yet, so we're going to get this kind of preview, I guess I would say, here at night. So as you begin to walk, the entire way, and it's 2 kilometers, the entire way is covered with luminaries all the way along. Now, a little bit of a pro tip here. We'll give you a spoiler alert too. Do this. If you get an opportunity to do Petra at night, absolutely 100% do this. But be sure that you bring some type of walking stick, hiking pole, something of this nature, because it is dark. The only thing illuminating your way is these small luminaries on each side, and they're very clear. They do not want you turning on flashlights. Don't get your phone out. Of course, there were a few people didn't listen, but
so it only does produce just a little bit of light.
Right, and there are a few spots that are uneven. Most of it's flat, either gravel or concrete paved to get to the treasury, which is where the Petra by Night exhibit happens. But those stones can come up rather quickly, so it's nice to have at least a little walking stick to help you get through there. And you brought your hiking poles, and I think you were
very glad that I did. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, you go and wind your way through. Again, there are a couple bathrooms along the way, so don't worry about that. And you get down to the canyon, the famous canyon that you walk through to get into Petra, and then you come around the corner, and there through the crack in the canyon is the treasury, the most famous structure in Petra, one of the most famous structures in the entire world.
Spectacular. I mean, it just, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it takes your breath away. And they have it very lightly lit with different colors that cycle through, and hundreds of luminaries on the ground below it that just bring shadows up to it. But they have you come down, sit down, and then they do a small musical program. They have someone play a flute, someone play a Bedouin instrument that's a kind of like a single string violin. And, he kind of talks about just being quiet and listening, and it was really nice.
They gave us some Bedouin tea.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was just it's supposed to be a very meditating, spiritual experience. So as you're walking, there's no guide that's telling you this is what you're seeing or what you're going to see in any description whatsoever. This is kind of you walk it on your own, at your own pace. I mean, he tells you be down at the treasury by 9 o'clock, but otherwise you're just walking at your own pace. There was only about 40 of us here, so again, it was just a pretty small group.
And in high season, there'd be hundreds of people.
Yes, they certainly could accommodate many more people. But very cool. By the way, they only do this 3 nights a week. So hopefully when you're here visiting, you're here on one of those nights.
Yeah, we're not going to say which ones because we don't want to give incorrect information because it changes. In fact, they were only doing it 2 nights a week. They added this one night, and they just had happened to add it we were there on a Thursday, and they added it, and we were just fortunate to get to go to that.
Yes.
So a couple of hints. Don't rush down to the treasury. What we found is, people kind of bunch up at the beginning. They're excited to get in there. They all rush in. They walk really quick. But what we did is we actually kind of hung back a little bit. They gave you, as Nancy mentioned, a specific time. They say, as an example, be at the treasury by 9 o'clock.
So 2 kilometers by basically it was about 50 minutes of
Yeah.
walking time.
Yeah, and so you just want to time it and know how long it's going to take you to walk 2 kilometers, and then don't rush, because then you can kind of walk alone. At least we walked alone most of it. You can get neat pictures. You can just have that quiet contemplation with the luminaries. So again, avoid the crowds. Don't rush in. They'll have a seat for you when you get there, and just kind of enjoy the walk. And the other things is, it's great to take pictures. You're seeing the pictures we took, but you're also not seeing the other 45 minutes where we weren't taking pictures. So really absorb this time. Put the camera down. Don't look at Petra always through your camera lens. Look at it through your eyes and take it in is a real pro tip of ours. Take in this time here in the Middle East when you're here.
Well, from there, then it was time to walk the 2 kilometers back out, which we did. Now, the taxi drive was a round trip taxi drive. So he was there. I guess he wasn't really waiting on us. We waited on him for about 2 minutes, and then he showed up and then took us back to the hotel. Now, here's something to consider. Our hotel was not right downtown. The Marriott happens to be up high on a hill, so when we'd come down and we'd visited this area, the Petra is kind of in their downtown area. I think it would have been very nice for us to have stayed downtown. We would have had opportunity to kind of look around in the area, maybe go to a local restaurant, whereas when we were at the Marriott, we're basically secluded up there and are limited to the restaurant at the Marriott.
Right. Now, the advantage of the Marriott is it is way up on a hill, as Nancy said, so you get this beautiful view of Petra. We got this sunset and the light on the mountains.
It was gorgeous.
So there's a reason this hotel's up here. But if you want to see that, you can always just take an Uber or a taxi up to the mountain. You can look at it, but then you can come back to your hotel and be down right near Petra and the action, as Nate said, restaurants, etc. So it is a trade-off.
Yep.
But I think the recommendation we would have is stay at a hotel down right by the Petra entrance. So a couple of them that are down there are the Petra Moon and the Movenpick. Both of those are really good hotels, and they're literally across the street from the entrance to the Petra Visitor Center. So that's what we'd recommend in the future, is to stay at one of those places.
Well, so we got up the next morning. Again, it's just a beautiful view outside. We've got another great day. In fact, I think we were very fortunate with the weather while we've been here.
The weather's
lovely.
Been absolutely perfect, yeah. And this is a benefit, what we just said about the Marriott. Here's a benefit. We're having breakfast overlooking the sunrise over Petra. So it's not a bad hotel. Don't get us wrong. It is absolutely gorgeous. We just think that the benefits of being downtown might be a little better. Well, after breakfast, our guide came and got us. He was prompt and on time, and we're heading to Petra.
We are. So we go down the hill, and we're going to the visitor center, the entrance. Our guide gets tickets there. So we're in the town of Wadi Musa. The entrance is right there in the downtown area. But then we start walking into Petra, and now, being daylight, we can see all the things that we missed last night. And there is a lot to see. There's so many carvings, and it's just, it's almost mind-blowing, really.
Well, after you get through the visitor center and the ticket gate, you start walking down through this. It's a gravel path. Now realize you're going to have a lot of people asking you, do you want a golf cart? Do you want horses? Do you want, do you want to ride down? Do you want to ride up? Again, it's like any place that you visit that has tourism, you're going to get approached and asked. And in general, and you'll hear us say this a couple times, just say, no thank you, or no shukran, which means no thank you in Arabic, and just say, and they're pretty good about, okay, and you may be asked 10 times, just have patience and don't worry about it. Well, as we're walking that path, it's about a mile or so, maybe just a little less, before you actually get to the crack in the rock, the crack of the valley that you're going to really enter Petra. But walking up to that, there's tons of sculptures and tombs and artifacts and everything. And again, this is the value of having a good guide that can explain and give you some context of each one of these things. So example, you're going to see these massive cubes, these stones, and these are all over the Middle East in different areas, and you can see how this is linked different areas. So as an example, the large square obelisk, or the cube that's in the middle of Mecca, is very similar to 3 of those that are in the area of Petra. We never would have put that together had our guide not pointed all that out. You'll also see in here, all of the different tombs will have 5 steps, and that's considered the 5 steps to going to heaven, and that's how you know it's a tomb. And so you'll see a lot of those things as we go through.
He said we'd see the exact same ones in Saudi Arabia as well. So I found that interesting.
Yeah, he even showed us in a book, he showed us a picture and goes, does this look like it's in Petra? We said, yeah, it looks exactly like, the Neparthian carvings in Petra. He goes, nope, it's in Saudi Arabia. So a lot of these peoples were linked, and especially through the trade routes, and the same art, carvings, beliefs, are throughout the whole Middle East. And it was really interesting to see all that come together in Petra.
So now we're walking down through the canyons here. One of the first things that we see is their water system, and it's really quite fascinating how they have put everything together that they can get fresh water.
Yeah, you'll see the channels running on each side. One side's an open channel, the other side is actually a clay pipe, and that side's for drinking water, the other side's for washing horses, etc. They have basins along the way. They've actually dammed up the different valleys that go into this canyon so they can store water. They even have an area where they'll put dips in, like little catches in below where the water's flowing, so the water flows into that and back out, and that removes the sand from the water. It drops out. They really knew what they were doing from the water system. Now, one thing we will say is, what happened to the Neparthians? Why was it abandoned? Well, basically it boils down to, once the Romans came into this area, they didn't like the competition of the Neparthians in their trade route here, so the Romans moved the trade route, and they wanted to effectively conquer the Neparthians. Well, Petra, as you'll see the whole time we're here, you can't conquer it. I mean, it is in a valley. It's perfectly protectable. I mean, that's why they built it here. They had one weakness, and that was their water. This water system all tied together to a spring up on the mountains. And of course, the Romans are pretty good at aquifers and water systems, and they understood all that too. So what they did is they cut off the aquifer from the spring, and then 4 months later, the Neparthians had to surrender to the Romans because they had no more water here in the desert. So that's kind of what happened to them and why their civilization went away. We think of it in the U.S. like the old Route 66 towns, and then they put the interstate in, and all of a sudden all those towns just dried up and went away because they moved the trade route, and that's what the Romans did.
Well, we continue walking, and we saw what we called as the earliest billboards, because you can see there's camels here, and then there's the camel guide here. You can just see the bottom part of him. But basically, it was a billboard saying, come here and rest. Bring your camels in. Come and rest and come and trade and come and eat.
Yep, it's like Motel 6. They keep the light on for you. And there again, we probably wouldn't have noticed that. If you're just walking through and say, I got to get to the treasury, we'd have maybe walked right by it, but our guide pointing out and saying, you see these feet here and this thing here, those are camels. Then suddenly you look at it and go, oh, I can see what was carved here 2,000 years ago. And it's all those little things. So as an example, he pointed out, there are symbols here of all 3 of the Abrahamic religions, so Christianity, Judaism, and Islam. And so we could see different things of the Holy Trinity, of the sign of, for Judaism, all those things, different carvings that have been done here. But all that said, let's get to the main course. Let's get to where everyone that comes to Petra wants to see, and that's the treasury. So again, having a good guide, we're walking up, he knows we're about there, and he says, okay, he goes, stand on this side. He goes, look right through this crack, through this opening, and when you do it just right, the one thing you can see is kind of the angel that's carved at the top of the treasury, and that's all you can see. So, having that first view, and then we walked around from there, you turn a corner, and then it comes out in all its glory is the treasure of Petra.
And it really was spectacular. I mean, I know we saw it at night the night before, but really seeing it in the daylight was incredible. Now here you can see there are families that are here. There are camels. So if you'd like to get your picture taken on a camel in front of the treasury, they will gladly do that for you for tips or for a fee. And it's just breathtaking to take it all in. There's a few little shops here if you want to pick up a souvenir. Some people will stop here at the treasury. They come in, they see the treasury, this is as far as they go, and they turn around and go back. But there's so much more to see if you continue on.
Right. So if you remember, we told you earlier, one of the reasons to come to visit the Middle East in this area right now is there's no crowds. So you can see, as Nancy said, there's a few families here. I will tell you, about half the people you're seeing in these pictures we're showing you are people that work work here. They're not even tourists. So, they're milling around waiting to make you coffee or to give you a camel ride or whatever. But here's the second reason. The treasury of Petra and a lot of the artifacts here, this is sandstone. It is very soft, it's eroding away, and even in the last couple hundred years you can see the changes. We bought some pictures of drawings that were made 200 years ago by the very first person that saw them, first Western person, that saw them, and he made all these drawings in detail, and you can see the changes. Our guide also told us you used to get to go inside the treasury into the main entrance. Now remember, this is a tomb. It's not a treasury, but it is a tomb. You used to be able to go in there. Well, you can no longer go in there because the facade, remember, the thing that makes Petra so special, this is all carved into the living rock. This is not a structure. This was carved into the rock. And the rock behind the facade of the the treasury is cracking. Mm-hmm. And they're very concerned that the entire facade may actually just collapse and fall.
The crack has been widening year over year.
Right. And so no one knows how much longer the treasury of Petra is even going to be here. Now they are looking at it. They're trying to decide from an engineering standpoint, how do they save it without also damaging it or taking the archaeological value away from it. In fact, right around the corner from the treasury, you can see here, there is another tomb that completely collapsed that was similar to the treasury, and it's just a pile of stones now. So reason number 2 to come here right now is you don't know how much longer these amazing artifacts are going to be here.
Well, from the treasury, we continue heading down the path. Now, on the left side of the path, we are seeing tombs, and on the right side of the path, we are seeing residences of where the people actually lived. And so it's just fascinating to see all of these homes and these tombs carved into the living rock. And we're continuing down now towards what's called the theater. Now, the theater is also carved into living rock. In fact, it is the largest theater carved into living rock that seats 3,000 people. So this was also very interesting to see.
Yeah, it was just quite fascinating. And once again, we have a picture of the theater here that you're seeing with nobody in it. This is unbelievable to be at a place, wonder of the world, and be able to take pictures of things when you don't have people in the picture.
There are a few people scattered around, but to be able to get these pictures is pretty incredible.
It is. Well, as Nancy said, on this, just after you pass the theater, these are the residences of Petra. Now, over the hills, they found tons of areas that's almost like a residential neighborhood that's back over the hills. Mm-hmm. So there was a lot more, but then there were a lot of people that lived in the carved caves and stones. Now, here's an interesting part of it. The local people here from Petra for hundreds of years actually lived in these, and until, of course, Petra was then rediscovered, and it was decided this was an archaeological site, a wonder of the world that needed to be preserved. So the government of Jordan actually has relocated those people not living in these caves and has built towns for them. There's 3 different towns around Petra that they have moved them into, but those people do have the right remaining to come back into Petra every day, come to their shops, set their shops up, and sell things to tourists and do donkey rides and horse rides and all the things that go with it. So they walk, and you can see here up on the hill just outside of the corner here of this area, one of those villages that they walk into each day. Now, once again, as you walk through this area, you're going to walk by some shops. They're going to, of course, ask you to come in, buy their things, and just a pleasant no thank you. And they're usually pretty good about letting you go on.
Right. But things you will find inside of the shops, if you're interested, is they have a lot of incense. They've got frankincense and myrrh. They have scarves, jewelry, silver, things of that nature. So that's what you'd find available.
Well, just past where that little row of shops is, and then the former residence caves on the right, you can look off in the distance and see some other amazing tombs. In fact, you can see a tomb that's carved almost exactly like the treasury, but it wasn't ever completely finished. In fact, some of those tombs along there was called the Queen's Tomb. There was a Roman soldier that took over one of those tombs, and he was buried in one. Not quite as spectacular as the treasury, but certainly seeing them all in a row was really amazing. Well, from there we turned down the road and we went to the Great Temple. Now, this was a massive massive temple, hundreds and hundreds of yards, across and deep, and it's actually been restored partially through people from Brown University. They've been given a lot of leeway by the Jordanian government to come here and do a lot of different restorations. And so, thank you for the people of Brown University for coming and doing that. But it's really spectacular to see the columns and the other tombs in the distance and how big that great temple was. And then we walked on, and the next building we saw it's called the Queen's Tomb. And although this was not actually a tomb, so in this case they called it a tomb, and it wasn't. This one was actually one of the only freestanding buildings, or constructed, not carved buildings, that's still standing in Petra. All the rest have been destroyed by earthquakes and time and erosion, but this one is still standing. They're not quite sure what this one was, but they do believe, they think it was maybe a temple is probably what it was, but it wasn't a tomb in this case, even though that's what they call it now. Well, from there we turn the corner and we're heading to lunch in a restaurant.
So at this point we had walked between 3 and 4 miles, and we are getting hungry. And so there's a restaurant here. It's owned by the Crown Plaza. It's a buffet restaurant. They had a nice selection of food. They had the mansaf that you had yesterday. But I thought everything was quite good. Well, so after lunch, it is now time to head to the monastery. Now this is 1.6 kilometers up. It's 840 steps up. So they do have donkeys here, and you negotiated a donkey for me. You decided to hike it with the hiking poles and with our guide, but I took the donkey. Now, friends, if you're going to take the donkey, you have to be in shape a little bit, because there is certainly strength involved. You are hanging on for dear life to that donkey. I mean, I'm feeling it today in my arms and in my thighs, and you're going to get a good core workout. So have a bit of strength to you if you're planning to take that donkey, because you're going to be holding on tight for a while.
Yeah, and it's not without its own terrors as you're going up and down. As I was walking it, and as Nancy mentioned, I walked it with our guide, and thank you for our guide for putting up with me stopping about 6 times on the way up and catch my breath on that 840 steps, 1 mile up there. And I saw several different people. They actually, in fact, I even saw one family that the wife would be on the donkey for a little bit, and she's like, oh, I can't do this, and she'd get off and then get back on. So it's a little scary, because those donkeys, they're very sure-footed, they're not going to fall, but it sure feels like they're going to, and it does scare a lot of people. So, just kind of take the fitness Nancy mentioned along with it. Isn't without its terrors going up there. Well, as Nancy mentioned, I walked up, got some beautiful views. You are going to be harassed a little bit as you're walking up. They're take a donkey, take it. The donkey boys, as they call them, are running up and down with their donkeys, offering you rides to take you on up to the top. And again, a nice no thank you, and you just keep walking and just kind of, have to put that aside. But I made it up to the top. You were up there, and there is the glorious monastery.
It is. Now this is not quite as detailed as the treasury, but it's larger than the treasury. So it's another beautiful sight to see. Yeah,
it is. And in this case, it actually was a monastery. It was a Christian church used for a while. So this happens to be about one of the only things in Petra that's actually named appropriately, probably this in the theater, as you put this together. But for me, it was worth it to make it to this spot. Now, there are further hikes you can do. There's other side trails you can do. It all depends on how much time you want to take in Petra. But for us, we're at our furthest distance now, away from the entrance, away from the treasury and that area that we're going to get. So we sat and we just enjoyed the view of the monastery, took a few pictures, and then you got back on your donkey. Now, one thing to note, please. Normally, the donkey rides stop at a certain area where there's still about 30, 40 steps, and they're very steep. Our guide was nice enough to negotiate with our donkey owner to take, actually, Nancy, all the way to the monastery. And so that was a little bit extra we paid to do that.
I was so grateful for
Yeah,
that.
You didn't have to do that last little bit.
I really was grateful. Yeah, this right. 50 Jordanian dollars well spent.
Well, and I headed on down. Nancy made it to the bottom, and our guide and I took some beautiful pictures with the overlooks and, and just now it's getting toward the evening, the temperature's beautiful, and there's even fewer crowds around. Most of the day, visitors have left, and we walk back through and seeing all those things again from a different perspective, from the great temple to the row of tombs to the theater and everything, and we make it back. We take one last look at the treasury, and it was funny. We just stood there for so long, and finally I went to our guide and said, we just don't want to leave, And but you do have to be out of Petra by sunset. That's when it closes. And we walked back through the canyon, and you can see it in different light and the beauty of it, and and again you can see we come across a little family here and there, a few people rushing in to see the treasury before sunset, but almost still nobody there.
Really, this was a stop of a lifetime.
Yeah.
It truly was, friends, that this was just absolutely an incredible place to visit.
Yeah, again, we've told you now is the time from the perspective of Petra is not going to stop eroding. It's not going to stop losing its beauty. And right now, this is the time because there's no crowds here. So we are also, to throw one other thing in, we are in low season. So their low season is January, February. That's when we happen to be visiting Petra in the Middle East right now. Their high season is going to come about March through June. And then they have another high season, November, December. And around October through December, and around July, August is also low season, but it is hot here then. So that's one of the reasons it's also low season. So that can kind of give you a gauge, an idea of when to come here. It's just absolutely stunning. I mean, you can see that, from what we're saying on it. But
well, Mike, how many steps? You walked the whole way. How many steps did you take? What'd your watch say?
When I got back, my step count showed 24,000 steps that day. So
that's a lot of steps. Yeah. So I did all of it except for that bit of going up to the top of the monastery and back down. But as a reminder, you've got donkeys. There are horses there that they will say are included in your ticket price, but of course they're expecting a tip.
Right.
There's the golf carts, and that is at a set rate at whatever the government has said that's what they are to charge. So
and those take you from the treasury to the visitor center, and the visitor center to the treasury. That's all they go.
Yes. So there are options for you if you don't want to walk that far.
Yeah. Petra is very accessible. So if you have mobility issues, you can go to the visitor center, pay a golf cart. They will take you to the treasury. You can see the treasury. If you want to walk to the theater, it's maybe another half mile to 3/4 of a mile walk. It's fairly flat. Yeah. If you really want to get to the monastery, you can take a donkey, but like Nancy said, it's pretty rough and does still take some strength to get there. But at a minimum, you can see the treasury and the areas around it.
And to me, the treasury was better than the monastery. Even though the monastery was bigger, it just wasn't as intricate. So for me, the treasury was top notch.
Right. Well, we wrapped up. Our guide and our driver took us back up to the Marriott. On the way, we stopped. There's a beautiful overlook. You can't miss it because it's got a Heart Petra sign.
I love Petra.
Yeah, and a couple things up there. But you can then get an overlook of the town and the entrance. You can see the path, at least the path as it goes up before it enters the canyon. That's really a beautiful spot. But we went back and collapsed for a little while, rested, had a little dinner. We just enjoyed the evening there in the hotel. But we
slept well.
Yeah, we did. We slept really well because tomorrow, in the next video, what you're going to see is we're going out to the amazing desert of Wadi Rum. And in fact, you can kind of get a preview behind us because that's where we're recording this right now. And we go out to the geodesic domes of Wadi Rum, and we stay in what's called a Martian dome. We take a safari and a 4x4 out in the desert. And we're going to see some more amazing things here in Jordan. So don't miss it.
We'll see you soon. Take care, friends. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.